to do something completely different now.
Right.
I want to be on the complete opposite spectrum of what I have been doing. And I want to try to take, whatever we have here and just make it huge.
This is All About the Song.
Welcome to the 114th episode of All About the Song. I am your host, Michael McDonnell, and thank you for joining us. On the podcast today, we have Wayley. Wayley, also known as Andrew Sheriff, is a folk pop singer-songwriter. He's absolutely fantastic. I'll get straight to it. I love his songs. There are only 2 of them out right now. They're produced by Tal Weisman, who's a producer on this podcast, who runs everything but the song on the Sounds Like Songs network. And that's how I met Andrew. We had a fantastic conversation. He's a wonderful person. I actually was supposed to do this intro last night, and I'm going to apologize to our editor, Dana Pierce, because Andrew was doing a live stream at a surf shop in Toronto called Surf the Greats. And I was watching it on, I guess it was Facebook that they were doing the live stream on. And I saw them performing. I was listening to it at home, and I realized that if I left at the exact moment that they finished, I could go hang out and congratulate both them and Kadima, who performed as well, who have been on this podcast many times. So it was, it's just, it's such a weird year. You do a live stream. I've done many of them at this point. There's no one there to congratulate you or say good job. And I thought that I'd take the bullet, and well, not much of a bullet, but we did drink some silver bullets. So it was very enjoyable. So I biked over and I saw them. So we're doing this intro the next morning. I thought it would be excellent to see him. And I was reminded how great a person he is. And I'm excited to bring you this conversation today. And now a quick word from our friends and sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Hailed, which is a coffee shop located at Yonge and Gerrard in the downtown Toronto area. If you are a coffee drinker, you must try Hailed. They are ranked consistently among the top 10 coffee houses in Toronto. Visit the store and support local Toronto-based businesses. Be sure to place your order at www.hailed.ca. This episode is also brought to you by Flickly. Thank you, Richard Atkin, friend of the podcast. We really appreciate your support for the Canadian music scene. Rich is the founder and CEO of Flickly, a premier video animation studio, working with large brands and enterprises across the globe. Learn more about Rich and his work at Flickly by going to the website flickly.com, FLIKLI.com, and connect with Richard Atkin on LinkedIn. So here we are, episode 114 of All About the Song featuring Wayley. Congratulations, you got 2 singles out, and they're both amazing.
Thank you.
And they're both well received.
Yeah.
How does it feel to have, well, first off, how does it feel to have these songs out?
Amazing. I was sitting on these songs for quite a long time.
Right.
In my head, it was probably about a year, maybe a year and a half. So to finally get 2 of them out, it feels super great. And just to, finally have Wayley in the world and be able to talk about it with people as an actual thing, not just, hey, I'm working on this project, Because
for this project, though, this is like the beginning.
This is the very beginning, yeah. So put out the first single in May, and that was all due to the fact that I just all of a sudden had a lot of time on my hands.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so put out the first single, which, like I said, I've been sitting on for a while, and it's all kind of just been slowly moving along since then, so...
Well, it really has, which is super cool. If we didn't have this this little hiccup in the road.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do anything in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Would it have been a drastic difference? Would you still be waiting?
I think so. Yeah. I think I was planning on waiting till at least summertime, maybe end of summer, maybe not even this year. I had no idea really.
Right.
I had been sitting on these songs and I felt really good about them. And I was kind of just figuring out a game plan on what to do with, releasing them. I didn't even have a name yet. So I was still figuring that out. And yeah, I was on tour with my other project and that got canned. And I was like, well, I think this just feels like the right time to put Wayley out now because what else am I going to do, man?
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you did. Like it's one of those things. I have a big thing about holding on to music because what ends up happening is that you start to kind of like share, like soft share it to people, and it's kind of like you're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out of it. But the excitement and that energy, you want to kind of preserve it or maintain it as much as you can. Putting it out, did you feel like people were expecting it? Or you kind of caught them off guard?
I think I caught people off guard for sure. And like you were saying, I kind of like holding on to music a bit too now, because it used to be a thing of like, let's write a song, put it out on MySpace or on SoundCloud or something like that. And that's cool, but it devalues the music so much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So now I have this big thing of waiting till it's like just the right time. But I kind of went against myself in that. And I just was like, let's put out the first single, just see how it's like. And I don't think anyone was expecting, even, people I produced it with were like, oh, it's on the internet? Okay, great. But that was the freedom I had because I'm an independent artist, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we just kind of got some artwork together and just threw that song out and just kind of saw where it was going to go. And from there, we were getting a really good response. And we're like, okay, let's start getting things moving. Let's start one-upping ourselves. Let's do things a little better. And it's kind of become my full-time thing now, where I always saw it as maybe it was going to be a side project but all of a sudden people that didn't have their eyes on me now have their eyes on me kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, it's super weird because you never know what's going to catch the attention of a listener or, a record exec or anything like that, right? It's like, it's never what you think it is.
Yeah.
That's the funniest thing.
Well, and I mean, you've probably heard that or, thousands of times, but that doesn't do you any good until it happens to yourself. And then you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is why it's so important to just continue to do stuff like every day and just put stuff out because you never know what's going to stick.
Yeah, and I think recently what's helped me a lot is just, treating music as a full-time job. And I think that's overlooked by a lot of independent artists where they think it's all about the music.
Yeah.
Which maybe one day it might be, and that would be super nice. But at the very beginning, you kind of got to sit down and be on your computer all day long, sending emails, this and that. And that's kind of something that's changed my game a lot recently, I think.
So, not to get too inside baseball, but run us through like a day in the life in a sense.
Yeah, I've just kind of made it into like I'm going to work. So I wake up and I throw on a bunch of coffee and I put on clothes sometimes. And I sit down at my desk and I just get my laptop out and I kind of have a to-do list of stuff.
Yeah.
There's emails to, whatever. If you have a single out at the time, you're sending emails to blogs. You're figuring out a post for that day on all your social media accounts. You're sending emails out to maybe college radio to get your music played. Pre-COVID, you're sending booking emails. Like there was a point where I was getting ready to play shows and I was sending maybe like I had a goal of 50 emails per day to venues just to kind of, you have to map out your tour. And that's,
yeah.
I treat it as I'm a full-time desk person.
Right. Well, it's really encouraging to hear. And Tal Weisman was telling me kind of about your wake up and do it. If you have maybe nothing to do on your to-do list, what are you occupying your time with?
Well, practicing at that point, right? But I feel like when there's nothing on my to-do list, I find something to do,
Right.
because there always should be something to do, right? That's the thing. You gotta with music, you kind of gotta find your own things to do, because there's not really, especially when you're an independent artist, there's not really like a per se like strict schedule that you have. You're making it for yourself, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if I feel like I have nothing that day, I'll go on and I'm like, oh, I'll just email more blogs. I'll just do this cold emails, see what I can get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a huge game changer for me recently, because the work, it shows, in a sense of that, you may have other friends who are great musicians and incredible performers and everything like that, but their music isn't hitting as hard because they're not business savvy per se, maybe, right? So it's interesting what music is now. You have to be almost like a business person
Which
first,
technically, I mean, it's almost like a trade. Like if you have a trade, for example, like if you build decks, you still have to invoice, go get material,
Exactly.
make sure you get paid. And I think that with music, the way that it's kind of, I would say like the art, as the years have gone on, it's gone in so many different ways. Like you mentioned MySpace, for example.
Yeah.
I think everyone's idea was to build a really great MySpace, get discovered, get signed by a label, and then just like go limp. And then they just tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And then like hopefully somebody in the band is like writing amazing songs and you're good to go. And I know that there was like, I know that wasn't the way that it was for a successful act at that time or ever, but it did kind of feel like that.
It seems like that. And that's what everyone has that image in their head, right? And I certainly did too. And the matter of fact is, when you start getting all these things like a label, a manager, a booking agent, all that stuff, your life just becomes even, there's more work for you. You don't get to just be, go limp and just be the artist and go to parties and do this and that. It's like you're just adding 10 times more work to your daily routine,
Yeah. Well, they're working for you, not you working for them.
Exactly. But,
But
you're still putting in the work, right?
Absolutely. I think that it always feels nice when you're working on something that you're so like unsure of directionally, because creativity is so kind of fluid and it just can naturally happen.
Yeah.
But to create that as a business also kind of goes against the notion of being a creative.
Exactly.
And that's a really hard code to crack, because at certain points, I don't think now at all, or at least a minimal amount in comparison to before, there was a bit of like an idea that you were a persona.
Yeah.
And like you were this mysterious character that just, wrote songs late at night, smoking cigarettes and drinking champagne. And then you'd wake the band up and be like, here's my song. And they'd go, thank you, Elton John, let's go. But there was no like elbow grease involved.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about pop culture in that way. Like it really is so, it puts this image in a young artist's head, and that's what you're striving for. But there's a lot more involved than you think, right? And I think more than ever now, people are trying to bring that back, where they want, let's say, a manager wants his artist to have that persona, that look to everyone but them, like their little two people inside group. You know what I mean? That kind of thing excites people, and it has kind of gone away a bit. So I feel like, more than ever now, people are trying to bring that back, and it's a little bit put on, but
I think there's a weird balance, because I've seen it on the other side too, where you have a band that seem like a miniature corporation.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, I don't know if like, and most of the time these artists are also able to pull it off, but you don't want to get too pulled away from the creativity.
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing a band's biography, and they're kind of like bragging about the fact that like the bass player was like a designer, and the guitar player was an engineer, and this person was a photographer, and this person was this. And it's like, you guys have so many other things that you do. Do you have time to like rehearse and write really good songs as well? And
and I'm still struggling to balance that right now, because you do get caught up in the whole business thing, and then you're like, now you got to go play a show, and you haven't practiced for a week because you've been on the computer. So it's hard to find that balance.
Yeah.
And it all ends up falling into place eventually. But
well, I'm glad we highlighted this, because I think that it is something that musicians need to be reminded of, is that there is two sides to this, even like left side, right side.
Absolutely. And you shouldn't be afraid to talk about that too, because people think it's not cool, right?
Yeah.
But I think it is cool if you're working hard to do what you love. So there's no shame in that, right? And I just think it's more impressive.
Music is a very weird, it's a very interesting niche where there are a lot of things you like don't want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you go to like the biggest shows ever, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is no different than like Cirque du Soleil. Like if you don't have like these technical people that are pulling it all together, just because they're not on stage doesn't mean like they're so integral to the creativity, regardless of the logistics of their position.
Yeah, and sometimes, as much as it sucks to say it, the music sometimes comes last in that whole thing. Like the way your stage looks sometimes is so important to people, and it can make or break if that was a good show for them.
Yeah.
Regardless of how good you performed or what the music is. So that's something that's often overlooked, and these are little things that no one talks about, right? Because music is the main thing. But
if you go to see a show, and I know like I would love to go see like a show with the Fillmore in 1963, like Jefferson Airplane, and they're on the stage, and Rolling Stone magazine's like super new, and there's like this hippie era vibe and stuff like that. But then I think about what like a Beyonce concert is like, or these massive productions. And there's a huge gap to then to now. And I always love to see a band play like Down and Dirty, but wow, like you can get just carried away in a light show, and it's nice to see.
Yeah, I totally get that, but I think that this sort of thing should be talked about more often, and there should be no shame in it. And I've said this on podcasts before. Like I'm a huge supporter of education when it comes to this sort of stuff. Like that was definitely something that when I was growing up, it was not cool for an artist to be educated, especially in music. It was always like, I'm self-taught this, I'm self-taught that. Never had any help. I'm just like so naturally awesome. And I was like, I had this whole image in my head now. You have a whole bunch of like 16-year-olds thinking that they should drop out of school and just like go write tunes and smoke cigarettes and drink and like get themselves into all sorts of weird situations so they could be a better artist. And I think that's cool and all, but you should be encouraging people as an artist to do better for themselves.
Well, totally, because that's not actually like a path to good art, maybe eventually, but it just means that you're going to lose your way. And I remember there were bands and artists that I saw doing that, and they always had the best after parties. But then the after parties became parties, and then they weren't even playing. They were just hosting parties.
Yeah.
And then they were just drinking excessively.
Yeah,
and then they were just looking for another place to drink excessively, and then the band hadn't played a show in 6 months, and then what are you doing?
Yeah, and I think more than ever, you're striving for longevity in your career now, music-wise.
Yeah.
Especially because there's no such thing as overnight success and just, a one-hit wonder. You're not going to make a living off of being a one-hit wonder anymore. You're not selling records. You're not on the radio like crazy getting paid like they used to.
No.
So you have to strive for longevity in your career. And that sort of thing doesn't do it, right? I've heard people say, I just have no inspiration lately writing. I think I'm going to try like shrooms and then go write. And I'm like, well, first of all, you never done shrooms and you're going to go try to write. So I don't think that's a great idea. But also, how about just try co-writing or something like that?
Or go for a bike ride.
There's all these self-destructive things that back in the day, artists were kind of, inspiring people with. And I'm like, guys, let's take this at a different angle, right? Like we don't
Yeah.
You don't have to be like that.
I don't know if you've seen the Eagles documentary. It's on Netflix. But, I can't remember his name now. The lead singer of the Eagles, who recently passed away, lived above Jackson Browne.
Okay.
And he talked about how Jackson Browne, he'd hear him making his tea in the morning, sitting down at the piano and just going, ba-da-da-da-da. Okay, ba-da-da-da-da-da. And he just kept going over and over and repeating. And all of a sudden he was like, oh, elbow grease. And I've always thought about that. You know, I always think about those moments where you don't necessarily feel inspired.
Mm-hmm.
You just try something, noodle,
Yeah.
doodle. And I've been producing a classical radio show on CIUT. And when the songs are being introduced, I find that the hosts of the show are always talking about how like they had dinner and then they'd sit by the piano and just start noodling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when some of like their greatest works would come out in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just, you just gotta like continue to do it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And especially that's why I think co-writing is super important, because you have someone else there to help you when you get to that point. More often than not, if I'm writing on my own, once I get to that point where I can't move forward,
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. And you know what I mean? So it's nice to have that other person pushing you in those situations. And sometimes the best songs I've ever written come from sessions where I'm not inspired at all. I'm just pushing along to finish a song, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the worst songs come from the ones where I'm most inspired and I'm not really thinking about it. And so it's a weird balance, but yeah, there's new ways to do it. And I think it's cool to encourage people to do that rather than be self-destructive. So
How's it like working with Tal Weisman?
working with Tal is amazing. We're best buds. Like we go surfing all the time. We've been doing a lot more than that lately, actually, because there's been some great waves. But we
every time I call him, he's chasing some wave somewhere with you. Yeah,
Tal is. I don't get how that guy has that much energy. He can be out in the water for like 7 hours, and I'm on the shore just gasping for air. And he's like, "All right, man, I'll be out in a bit." And then it's 2 hours later. You know what I mean?
Wow.
He loves surfing, and I do too. But yeah, we've been doing a lot of that lately.
Well, it's nice to have common interests with somebody that you're working with on a creative level as well.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes those like inconsequential conversations come back in a writing session that become like the most meaningful part of the song, or he or you are able to bring something out of the other person based on just experience with them.
And I think the nice thing about Tal and I is we're both professional enough that we can sit down and just get to work if we have to, right? So there has been cases where, you end up becoming friends with your producer or whatever, and then you guys never get any work done, right? It's like you're sitting around in the studio drinking coffee and talking about whatever for the whole session, which is fun too, but you don't get anything done.
It's fun once in a while. The thing I do like about Tal is there's always a moment like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, and Tal's such a talented guy in all aspects of music that it's so easy to work with Tal, which I really like. And he just makes the whole thing enjoyable, because it can be tough when you're in a long studio session or the producer might not have any guidance for you. That's a tough thing for me. Like I really like getting that producer guidance. I feel like it moves the session along. It makes the songs better, makes you more inspired as an artist. And Tal can do that if you want. He can also let you do your thing if you want to as well. So I've really enjoyed working with Tal, and I think he's really played a huge role in shaping Wayley as, a new thing that I'm doing. So yeah.
Well, I gotta say, I've been using bone conduction headphones. So
what the heck is that?
But they sit like right here on your ear.
Okay.
For our audio listeners, it's just in front of like your earlobe.
Okay.
And so it vibrates.
Right.
And it's really awesome for like bike riding and stuff.
Okay.
So I've been listening to your songs specifically on that, which it doesn't really have all of like the bass quality and stuff. And
Interesting.
I was listening to it on the way here in the car. I was like, oh my gosh, like it has that Weisman, that oomph. And I think that's like one of the things that I love about the song, that it has so much like energy inside it, which is good.
That's exactly what we were going for. So I'm glad that you're saying that. And I come from like a super folk background, and I've been performing under my own name, Andrew Sheriff, for a long time. And all the other projects I've been in the past were pretty much just raw folk Americana type of things. So when I came to Tal and Andre, who co-produced the record, or the EP rather, I said, I want to do something completely different now.
Right.
I want to be on the complete opposite spectrum of what I have been doing. And I want to try to take, whatever we have here and just make it huge.
Right.
So, when we were in the studio, that's kind of where we're going from. Like, let's get some horns going. And Tal was great with the trumpet player. We got some crazy good stuff. We experimented with cellist rather, and we had pedal steel in there, which is weird for like kind of pop music, but we were trying to get that huge full sound. So
yeah,
I'm glad that kind of is received well.
Well, it's also simple. Like there's a lot of things you're like, oh, cool. Like the trumpet was something that I was I was pleasantly surprised, because it's like this would have been where like a guitar solo would have gone, but then it just keeps it like really vibing. And that was a nice thing too. Like there's not a lot of like jazz going on. Like there's a lot of like, there's just a nice harmony and minimalism that gives it like that. I felt like I was driving a little bit too fast while I listened to it, which is always like a good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, it's all so new. We still haven't like coined a term for it, but I'm going to call it like folk pop.
I like that. I wanted to steer away from asking you about the genre of it, because I didn't want to put it in a box.
Yeah.
But it wasn't exactly obvious as to a label of it, which I really enjoyed. Like
I think that's what a lot of my music is like. So,
but there's a way. You can say that, and it can be said in a way of like, I don't get you, or I'm confused with what this is. And then there's a way that you're doing it where it's like, this is something new. This is something that I can't put my finger on, but I like it.
Yeah, and I think that's always the goal when creating music these days, because it's so easy to fall into that same category as everyone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So especially when I'm going into the studio and you're starting to think about the production of it, I'm like, how can we do this differently than it already has been done before, right? Because you do want to set yourself out of the crowd.
Yes.
So with the horns thing, that was one of my kind of angles with making it different, because usually where the horns are, that'd be like a guitar solo or something like that, right? But I thought, I had a friend, we used to be into Passenger back in the day, and we always thought it was super cool that he used a bunch of horns in his music, and we loved the Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros and how they use the horns. And that kind of all went away. Like people stopped doing that. And I'm like, so when we were producing this song, I was like, guys, we got to get a horn in here. And I think that's been one of the things that everyone's pointing out, because it's unique, right? It's different. You don't always hear that. So I'm glad it worked out.
Well, I know a couple of accordion players, depending on where you want to go for the next one.
Okay. Hey, man, could be into it. You'd be surprised. Like we have pedal steel all over those songs, and
it's just such a beautiful instrument.
Yeah.
Outside of having to lug it around, I think it just adds such a amazing depth to music too, because it falls along with the guitar so well.
Yeah.
But it also kind of plays roles in like the piano, percussion, almost like synth side of it too.
Yeah, I mean, they're super interesting and kind of unorthodox pedal steel parts, but I love the pedal steel guitar. It's probably my favorite instrument, and I love it in a traditional way on kind of old classic country stuff, but I still wanted to use it on this more poppy stuff and kind of take a different approach to it.
Yeah, because you didn't make it sound country.
No.
You know how there's like a lot of like modern pop,
Yeah.
modern country that sounds like pop, and then you just put like a banjo or a lap steel or like a fiddle sound or something, and you're like, oh, now it's country.
Yeah.
It was really nice the way that you had these instruments complement the song without veering it into a new direction.
Yeah, and that was all thanks to the pedal steel player. His name's Michael Eckert, and he does some really kind of weird experimental stuff on the pedal steel, and he had like a whole rig going that he was a whole pedal board and all that stuff that he was going crazy on while he was playing. So
That's so cool.
it was like a science, really, and it was really awesome to see. And we weren't even sure if it was going to work out, but it did, and I'm glad that we did it. So yeah, it's just all those little things. I love trying to just shove something that shouldn't be there in there, and then it works. It feels awesome when it does.
Yeah. Now, where are you originally from?
Toronto.
What was the first music that you got into? Like first song, first album?
It's hard to say. I don't know. Like, I don't think I was one of those kids that was like super into music. So I would never like sit there and put a record on and listen to the whole thing and be like, wow. Like I was like out playing hockey, or I love skateboarding and snowboarding and like all that sort of stuff. I didn't even like playing music really till I was in high school. So
what was it that got you?
I think when you realize that you could play music and be cool and like
Not
get
hurt yourself
girls
on a
and-
skateboard?
Yeah. Actually, though, that played a huge role in it too. I really thought I was going to be like a pro skateboarder or something like that till I was like 16. I got injured pretty bad, and I kind of just took a step back from like all that sort of stuff. And and slowly music started creeping in there more and more. And I think it was really like the whole City and Color era, like the MTV Unplugged thing just started really speaking to me. Specifically this one artist or band rather called Never Shout Never back in the day.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember them, but it was kind of like punk unplugged sort of thing. Punk guy on an acoustic guitar.
I don't think I do. No.
It was fronted by this guy named Christopher Drew.
Okay.
It's kind of like the soft boy punk kind of thing. I don't know what you'd say, but it was like very not punk, but it was still at Warped Tour and all that stuff. So
yeah.
I got really into that. I was like, I could get on board with this. This is mellow. So I think if I had to say what inspired me at a young age, I would have to say Never Shout Never and City and Color. Like I was really into that sort of, I liked punk music when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then I started liking the acoustic stuff more. So it was a great transition into it.
Mm-hmm.
So City and Color was a huge part in that. Loved all those early City and Color records. And I remember actually stumbling upon this mini documentary of them recording, I think it was Bring Me Your Love at Catherine North in Hamilton.
Okay.
And I saw that studio, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that studio.
No.
It's in a old church. So it's an old church, huge stained glass windows, everything that they converted into a studio. And I saw that video, I'm like, man, that's the coolest studio I've ever seen. And I remember that exact moment, I was like, man, like I'll never be there. Like that's so cool. So fast forward a couple of years, and I'm in this folk duo called Andrew and Veda, and we were getting a bit of traction going, and we were like, we should record a record. Where are we going to do it? And I was like, boom, Catherine North, we have to. This is my dream. And then, next thing you know, I'm in there, and I'm like, dude, I could have never imagined that I would be here when I was like a 16-year-old kid watching this video. I thought like this place was untouchable. It's the coolest place on earth to me. And I ended up becoming super good friends with Dan Hosh, who was co-owner at the time. And that's life, man. It's weird how it works. But I don't know how I segued into that.
No, well, the idea of seeing something like in your youth that you're like, almost like, I could never do that. I can't see how I could ever do that, but I also really want to do that. And sometimes even a thought like that gets your feet moving towards a direction that you didn't even realize you would begun.
So. Yeah. And it inspires you it kind of says to you like, whoa, I'm actually kind of making movement here. Like,
yeah,
it's cool to get that feeling. I remember it was last year. I was backstage at Elora Riverfest.
Okay. And
City and Color was headlining that festival. And I remember just like being in the beer line beside Dallas Green, and I'm just like 16-year-old me would be losing it right now.
And you have to be like, hey,
what's up, man? And
Nice to see you, yeah.
But like in my head, I'm like, okay, man, once it's fine. But it's a cool feeling too, because you're like, I can't. One step closer, man. One step closer.
Dallas Green used to grocery shop at a neighborly grocery store in our area where we all worked as 19-year-olds. And he would go in the produce section, and like all the guys in the deli would come over to grab us at the pharmacy and be like, he's here. And we'd all run over just to like look at him for 2 seconds and see him like go to his car. We're like, so cool.
Yeah.
He shops where we do.
Yeah, man. That's sick.
But it is amazing to have even small, like, sometimes you have a very like defined, like, I'm going to do this, but it's also nice to be able to see those types of things and start working towards something that you think is amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think it ever hits you during that moment. Mm-hmm. But like even now, just me talking about it, I'm like, wow, that's sick. Yeah, but it's that sort of thing's really cool. But back to the music, I would definitely say that City and Color played a huge role. I wasn't that great at guitar in high school. I had lessons that my parents got me when I was like 8 maybe. Mm-hmm. And I think I went to 2 or 3 lessons and I was like, I hate this. I don't want to read notes out of a book. I don't want to learn anything. I just want to go like jump in the snow. Yeah. So I put the guitar down till I was 16, and then you kind of realize that you can go on YouTube or the internet and start like learning a song to sing along with. And that's kind of how it all started right there. I think I got a ukulele first because people were telling me that was a good segue to the guitar. And I already knew how to play kind of, but that's when I really started grinding my teeth. And I just would learn how to play all the songs off the City and Color record. And I can never sing them because his voice is so high. So it's usually just me squealing. But yeah, other than that, I mean, in the early days, those were the 2 people for me, really. Never Shout Never and City and Color.
With where you're at now, having had a goal to work at the studio that you saw at that age, at 16, what's your new spot you want to see? Or do you have one?
I don't know if I make goals in my head anymore in that sense. I think it's more of just accepting the fact that the road is so unknown that you're going to take in music, and just kind of going along with that. Working hard, but accepting that if something totally weird that you never thought was going to happen comes up, you should take it if it's a good opportunity, even if it's not exactly what you pictured. Yeah. You know what I mean? So,
well, because there's another day.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the hard thing about music too, is you do develop these kind of like ways that you see things in your head. And then sometimes if they're not exactly that, you're kind of not fully fulfilled with the way you did it. And I think that's a self-destructive way to think, at least for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to just be kind of open to anything. And that's what Wayley is all about, by the way. It's just kind of like, let's make amazing music. Let's have, no doubts about anything. Let's not try to be perfect. Let's just try to do what comes out of us and let it flow naturally, and just like try stuff that we never have.
So what's next for you?
There's so much on the table, man. Like I don't even know what's next for me, really. We have more music that will be released soon. But it's a constant, like, how should we do this now? How should we do that? Because the world's changing with COVID. So it's like, oh, should we put out an EP, or should we wait till we could play a release show, or should we do an online show? And it's constantly like every day it's like, okay, now we're going to do it this way because this has changed. And okay, now we can't do shows now, so we're going to do it this way. So I don't even know what's next, man. I'm just taking it day by day. We're working on a lot of great new content, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just like, who knows?
I'd like to thank Wayley, Andrew Sheriff, for being on the podcast. Be sure to check him out. His links are in the description below if you're watching the video. And speaking about video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the notification button, leave a comment. We love to hear from you. If you're watching video and you're out and about, you want to check out this podcast while you're running your errands, while you're doing your workouts, we are available on audio. Wherever you listen to your podcasts, we are there. For questions, comments, suggestions for a guest you'd like to hear on the podcast, send us an email, allaboutthesongpodcast@gmail.com. Our website for past episodes is www.allaboutthesongpodcast.com. Be sure to check out our sister podcast, Everything But the Song by Tal Weisman. I was featured on his last episode. It was part 2, so we finished our conversation. Oh man, it's wild to be a guest on a podcast. I know me saying that as a host of a podcast, being on the other side of the table is wild, and it was a very fun conversation. So check all of that out. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. We hope to see you next week.